we're going to go over some practical ways that we can use distortion tastefully in a mix to enhance it. And then we'll go over a couple of other things with reverb that we haven't gone over, but that we've heard in some of the music that was in for music blueprinting in Audio MIDI 1. So, and your assignment will be to work on this short track and do some of these techniques. You guys, at this point, you guys are so used to hearing distortion, right? It's in everything, that it's not anything different for you. But back in the day, it was such a different, unique sound, and it's just really, it's everywhere. It's used constantly. Like I said, it's just a short little excerpt. Now, it's clean. All of the volumes are pretty good. I've done a little panning here. There's no panning on your session, I don't think. So it's made up of a drum loop. Right? Just a 2-bar drum loop. It's an electric bass. Electric piano. A clavinet, which you've heard from Stevie Wonder songs. That's a little bit on the right. And the Expand 2 Stratocaster. Panned a little bit to the left. And then a simple synthesizer sound on Expand, playing a little melodic figure. Great. All right, so I'm going to solo the drums, and we're going to listen to the drums. They're very clean. Now, this is a compressor. I haven't gone over compression in this class yet, but we'll be going over it a little bit in Audio MIDI 1. We're certainly going to be going over it in Audio MIDI 2 and in digital recording and composition. And the general idea is that a compressor is an automatic volume control. It's like having somebody's hand on a fader that moves it up and down quickly to make sure that things don't get too loud and stick out in the mix, right? And basically, when people were mixing, that's how the first compressor was. Somebody moving it was actually knobs or these handles that moved back and forth like this. The idea of faders, that didn't come until the late 60s with this guy, Tom Dowd, who was like one of the greatest engineers of all time. And I'm actually friends with his daughter, and I'm going to try to have her come and speak with us because he's no longer with us in Audio MIDI 2 next semester. Anyway, he adapted that. So compressors can be very transparent where you don't even know that it's there, but they can also be tone shaping devices. Okay. So this is the Bomb Factory 76 peak limiter. It's modeled on something called the 1176 compressor, which was an analog machine. Piece of gear. And if we look at this, it's got an input, an output, an attack, a release, and a ratio. The way that this works is that the more you turn up the input, the more the sound becomes compressed. And then what you do is you balance that with the output so that you're not overdriving the sound. The attack is how long it takes until the compressor starts to kick in. And this is counterintuitive in that all the way to the right, the compression starts almost immediately, and all the way to the left, it takes time before the compressor kicks in. And the release is how long until the compressor stops compressing. The ratio is 4, 8, 12, and 20. That's the number of decibels that get reduced when it goes over the threshold that the input drives. So I'll go over this in more detail in the future. But what I've got here is I've got this set up so that all 4 of these buttons, right? This is 4 dB, 8, 12, 20. If I hold the shift key down and click on any of these, all 4 of these are pushed in. And that creates a special effect with the drums. So let's take a listen to this. I can turn the output up a little more. So do you see that's the unprocessed sound? That's colored, right? So there is some distortion going on there. The unit is actually, you're overdriving a little bit, and the model replicates the behavior of the analog device, which distorts a little bit. And what you're also hearing is that the loud sounds are the volume of them are brought down so much that the softer sounds become louder, and that adds like another vibe to the sound. Right, and I'll bypass that. See how that has much more vibe to it? I don't know how to describe it, but now that's a bit much, right? So I'm going to bypass this. And there's something called parallel processing, which is a great technique. Some of these processors have a mix control where you can mix the amount of the effect in with the dry signal. So now you've seen that in delay and reverb, right? There's a mix control. When it's all the way to the left on deverb and mod delay 3, that means there's more dry signal coming through. Well, there are compressors and distortion plugins and devices where you can blend that in. But some of them don't have that, and the solution for that is to do something called parallel processing. So what I've done here is I've added an AUX input here, a stereo AUX input, and I've set its input up to bus 1 and 2 right here. And I've got a send here, which is set up to bus 1 and 2. And on this channel, I have several different saturation plugins, and we'll see the effect of all those. So I've got a fair amount of signal going to the saturation track. Now, I'm going to make a new light rule. Typically in a mix, I put all of my auxiliary effects like reverb and delay, things that I run onto a aux track, time-based effects, down at the bottom of the session, because that's analogous to being over on the far right-hand side of a mixing console, and that's typically where they would have been back in the day, and we're sort of following the principles of analog recording here, because there's a reason why they work so well. No need to change it's not broke, don't fix it. But when you're doing parallel processing like this, you could put the aux track right underneath the track that's being processed. This way they're right there and you don't have to go searching for it. And on a small track like this with only a few instruments, it's not a big deal. But if you've got 80 or 90 instruments, to search for that, parallel processing for the drums can be a little difficult. Okay, so right here, These are all plugins that are inside of Pro Tools. We've got real tape saturation. All right, so let's listen to the drums without it. I've muted the send, and I'll put it in. Now, I don't know if you can hear this, but if you listen to the timbre of the snare drum, right, there's more mid-range girth in there. Now, this is a subtle effect, right? It's adding a little distortion and adding a little mid-range. Very subtle. You're not going to, with this type of a plugin, you're not going to get a lot of distortion, but you are getting this coloration. Okay, let's look at the settings. So with this, I've got the drive turned all the way up to 12. I'm using a lo-fi. These are the different kinds of machines you can have, and this is a different kind of formula for tape. I could change that to classic. You don't really hear much of a difference in this scenario. Right, so that's cleaner. This adds a little more grit. The speed is how many inches per second of tape goes by the playback heads. And these are the three typical standard IPS, 7.5, 15, and 30. The faster the speed, the more hi-fi the sound. So I've got it all the way low. I don't have any noise. Played around with the bias. You don't have to worry about that. And then I've just tweaked the output a little bit. So let me mute the drums, and I've got the send here set up with the little pre button turned on, which means that we will hear the saturation, but not the dry drums. So that's the dry drums, and that's the saturation. Now I'll change the machine. And then blend that back in. Mute. So it's adding girth, right? Just a little tiny bit of saturation. Okay, so this is a plugin called Lo-Fi. And what this will do is a lot of different things. You could change the sample rate. You can change the bit depth, the sample size, right? You can add saturation. You can add distortion. You can add noise. So I'll play what I've done. Now, that's interesting because that's giving you a little, I don't know if you can hear this, but that's giving you a little bit of the taste of the compressor without the compression. Bypassed. And also what's happening there, I don't know if you could tell this, is that the sound is becoming more aggressive with more of an attitude. Now, I'll play around with some of these knobs and we'll take a listen. Actually, let me go back and let me mute so now we're just listening to the effect. So you could see how much it's making that sound dirty. Very distorted there. Now let's clean that up, right, by turning these all the way to the left. Let's play around with the sample rate. So the sample rate is now 22,050 hertz. When I enact the sample rate, can somebody tell me what's happening to the sound? Just give a description. You don't have to tell me technically what's going on. So without the sample rate reduction, how is the sound being changed? Anybody? Low pass. Yes, it's kind of like a low pass. That's right, Daniel. You're getting rid of the highs. And does anybody know the reason for that? There's something called the Nyquist theorem, which postulates that the highest frequency you hear in a sampled sound is 1/2 the sample rate. So right here, that's off. When I move this like this, down to that 22, the highest frequency you're now hearing is 11,025 hertz, half of this. And now let's add some distortion, some saturation, attitude. Let's bring our drums back in. Now we can bring the level down. Right? So you play around with that. That's a cool one. Let's take a listen to what happens when we turn the sample size down. Now we work in 24-bit. CD used to be 16-bit, right? So I'm going to go over this more later in the semester. So you're not going to hear a big difference here, probably over Zoom. Yeah, there's more detail at 24-bit, but that's probably. That's 8 bits. You're hearing a lot of distortion, right? I mean, you could really just pulverize the sound with that. So we've got the bomb factory and that distortion. And listen to how the feel changes. Right? It's got more groove to it. It's the same part. All right. Let's mute this. Mute this. Now, this is something that you don't have. It's called the saturation knob. This used to come with Pro Tools, but now if you want this, you have to go to this softtube.com website, and then you have to register and you can download it for free. You don't have to. It's not required for this class. But this is a very handy device for adding just a little bit of saturation. Just edge, nice edge. So more than the tape saturation, but not as much as lo-fi. So I'm going to mute the drums, and then we'll just listen to the saturation knob. So it's clean. So it's getting louder, but you can see it's also changing the sound. So I'm liking that setting right there. I might use this one. Now here's distortion. This is in the air. So if you go here and you go to Air Music Technology, there's distortion right in there under right here, D. So this is like this. You can make really nasty. This has a mix control, so you could use this as an insert and just play around with the mix. It's got a drive, an output. Right? You can just play around with the tone up here and the threshold for what level that the clipping starts. And then it's got three different types of clipping: hard, soft, and rap, and it's got a stereo switch. So let's take a listen to this. So here's with it off. And I'm going to turn it on. And with the original drum sound. Now, with something like this, the level that you're sending into this will increase or decrease the amount of drive. So if you like that kind of fuzz, but it's too loud for the track, what you would do is you could turn the output down here. Or you could turn the level down here and balance it in. Okay, next distortion device is something called the SansAmp. And this is a model of a little rack-mounted unit made by this company Tech 21, which used to be right on 21st Street in Manhattan. I'm not sure if they're still there, but the company's still in existence. And they made this unit, which I actually owned one in the late 90s into the 2000s. It was great for processing sounds, and it was really good for clean and slightly crunchy guitar sounds to be recorded direct. So this is basically a guitar pedal. Very fancy guitar pedal. Let's take a listen. So you can really make it dirty, but for this kind of a track, that's too much. And it has a level control. So it's got preamp, buzz, punch, crunch, drive. You just have to play around with these things to see what they all do and see how they interact with each other. So like the preamp, it gives you kind of more of a nasally kind of overdrive. Buzz seems to add more low mids, punch. It's similar to buzz, crunch. It's interesting. Crunch seems to make the sound last longer, right? It works on like the room tone of the snare drum. Bow, 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 right? Drive, overdrive, then just a tone control. So you might like that, and then if you turn the output down, you can blend it in. Okay, so this you should have in your package. This is a low pass filter, but what you can do with a Moog synthesizer is you can drive the filter. So I've got the drive on the filter turned all the way up, and I've just got a little bit of cutoff here. So let's take a listen to this, and it'll just be the right. So it gets rid of the cutoff, the high frequencies. And then if you turn up the resonance, and it's got a mix control. So that's kind of cool. And then impact, this is another compressor, and this will do similar to what the Bomb Factory did. But now we can blend it in. So we're still hearing a lot of the original track. But if I mute this. So I like that, and I'm going to add in some of the saturation knob. Right? So that's going to be my drums. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mute the other tracks, the synth, the Rhodes, the clav, and I'm going to focus in on the bass and the drums. So now what I've done with the bass is I've added that drive control. So let's take a look at this. So this is the mix, right? So I've got, this is clean. So that doesn't work for this style, right? But just a little bit, 25%. I've got the drive at 12. The output is full up, right? I don't have, I'm not doing anything with this, and I'm doing a soft clip. Let's see what happens if it's hard. Yeah, hard doesn't really work for this style. It's much nastier. Soft is good. And bring the mix down. Great. Now we'll listen to the Fender Rhodes, the electric piano. So this is a vintage filter. This is also in the Air. If you go to Air Instruments, vintage filter. Let's see. Vintage filter. So this imitates the Moog filter, except it gives you more options of filter types. So so it has 3 different kinds of low pass filters, and the higher the number, the steeper the slope, right? So 24 dB, the slope looks like this, and I can show you that a different way. I can show you that here with, right? So this is our EQ1. So if I hit low pass filter here, right? So 6 dB per octave. This is the cut. This is the way it slopes off, and then as I go up, you see it becomes a sharper slope, which means that less low frequencies go through. So this is a high pass filter. So let's do it with the low pass. So with 6 dB per octave, more high frequencies get through. With 24 dB, very few high frequencies get through. All right, let me get this out of there. But what this is cool is that it's got more control than that. So I've got it set to bandpass, which means it just lets a certain frequency in a band that I choose to go through, and it attenuates frequencies outside both low and high of that band. And then it's got a high pass filter. And then it's got cutoff and resonance and fat, which is like driving the filter a little bit more. So here's the Rhodes. So now I turn the fat up and you hear how it's distorting completely. So I just want a little bit of that fat. It makes it. And so what the resonance does is the cutoff frequency here is 611 hertz. It emphasizes frequencies around that value. But this is nice because you almost get a wow kind of sound. Wow, 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 wow. So the fat's a little bit too much. Okay, so now with the clavinet, this is also in your Air folder. This is the Fuzz Wah. So let's take a listen to this. So this has a fuzz drive. So this is like Eric Clapton had that wah-wah pedal he was demonstrating. If I turn the fuzz up, right, and I've got the mix set here to only about 35%. Right, so you can, I'm sweeping through the frequencies, and I've got this set for bandpass. So it's just going through a band in the middle and moving that around, and it's attenuating frequencies outside of that band. Too much drive though. And it's got a couple of mix controls. One is for the filter, and one is the mix of the whole. So I like that. That's pretty good. Next, on the clavinet, I've inserted, because I'm only going to use it on the clavinet, I've inserted slap. Okay, so that's too wet. So I'm going to bring I'm going to make that drier. Cool. Now we got the guitar. And all I've done to this is I've added some modulation to this with this Ensemble patch. So this is like chorusing, right? You could take the rate. If I turn the rate up, it's going to be... brrr. And then the depth is how wide the vibrato is. So you have to play with these things and get the sound. And I've got the stereo width turned all the way up, and I've got it mixed 50-50. And then this is a shimmer control, right? That's 100%, and I'll turn the shimmer down. Right, it's adding a really nice sheen afterwards, and the delay is how long it... Well, let's... Yeah, just got to keep that tight. So the clavinet's a little loud, right? So I like the way that the volume of the clavinet is driving this. So I don't want to touch. So for this is a little bit more advanced. So if I bring the volume of this down, it's going to affect the clavinet's not as... See how it's cleaner now? Because the way that the gain structure work is that the volume coming out of Expand 2 is feeding into the fuzz wah. And when you turn the volume down, it's not driving the virtual circuitry as much. So if I bring this up more, it's going to get louder, but it's also going to get more distorted. Right? So you could do one of two things, right? You could turn the output down here on the last processor in the chain here, and you would bring it down the same amount on both sides. Is that not working? Oh, that's the gain of the effect. Okay, so that's not going to work. So what you'll have to do here is something I don't recommend, is bring down the volume in the audio output. I do this with audio tracks, and I've got the saturation track brought down, but I typically don't do this with, and I teach not to do this with MIDI tracks. But I want to balance that and still get that funky. There we go. Okay, so now the next thing is we've got the synth. And the first thing I've done, just to add a little crunch to it, is add some of the SansAmp. So if you listen to the low end, there's like a little punch on the attack. It's a very subtle effect, but it does add some nice character to it. And then I've got this going through a nice delay, right? Now, there's one more thing. And I don't know if you remember when you listened to Black Cow. Remember at the beginning there was reverb on the left for one instrument, and then there was reverb on the right for another instrument. And let's say the clavinet was on the right, the reverb for the clavinet was on the left, and if the guitar was on the left, the reverb for the clavinet was on the right. All right? Okay. We can do that in Pro Tools. So what I've done here in these tracks down here is I've made 3 mono aux tracks. And I've panned one to the left, one in the center, and one to the right. And I've put a mono instance of Reverb in there, and I've just called up a bright plate, and I brought the delay time down. And what I'm doing here is on the, let's see, the one on the left, and I've set the inputs up to bus 3, 4, and 5 for these. And what I've done here is on, let's say on the clavinet, I've got reverb now coming out of the left speaker. And then with the Rhodes, I've got reverb coming out of the right speaker. Oh no, the Rhodes, I've got reverb coming out of the center. With the guitar, I've got reverb coming out of the right speaker because the guitar is panned to the left. Okay, so that sounds much better now than it did originally. Now, for your assignment for next week, you're going to download this session, and you're not going to have every one of these plugins in. You just figure out which one you want to use in the bus, in the parallel compression here, or the parallel effect here. You know, it could be a combination of one. It could just be one. It could be a combination of 2. That's your call. All right. There's nothing in, these are all empty in the session that you'll be downloading. And then just try to recreate this with the same or similar plugins that I'm using, but tweak them yourself to get it to sound the way that you want. Just remember, this is not like, cream or heavy metal. This is like a light jazz funk piece that could just use a little bit of processing to make it have a little bit more life. All right. So that's in our OneDrive. Distortion assignment right here. So that's class 5. Whoops. Okay. That's that. Any questions on that? Questiones. Nobody's asking questions. Okay, you guys have it all down. All right, so let's talk about scheduling. So there most likely will not be a class next Tuesday. I will email you Tuesday morning to tell you one way or the other. I don't think I'll be set up yet when I get back to New York. So this assignment will be due next Tuesday. So you can hand it in Tuesday night. I will definitely get up Wednesday and go through it and give you feedback videos. So our next class will be 2 weeks from today. Now, the next assignment that we're going to be doing, I want you to start thinking about. And let me show you a few things. Now, this goes along with what we've been talking about in terms of form and thinking about music form in a different way. So I'm going to play you a video. I might have played you this before. Okay, that's one. Let's play a second one, and then we'll talk about these. So sorry about that. That's my fault. Jeez, everything's out of control. All right, one more time. Okay, one more, and then we'll talk about this. Whoops. And this one, I'll talk about these in a second. Okay, so what are these? These are kinds of photo essays that I've created. All right, so I took all the pictures, I did all the video work, and then I assembled all these things and scored them. And so the first one I did several years ago on a DSLR camera that I had lying around. And then the second one I did, that was the Highline. And then the second one I did was, I shot it last summer, all those images up it was a couple days at Acadia National Park in Maine. That was with a much better camera and nice lens. And then the very last one, the rainy one, I did that with my phone. So what I'd like to do here is, and one of the main thrusts of this class is to get you to think about creating music differently than you normally would. So we've been going over how treatments can change the sound, reverb, delay, distortion. I've shown you some videos of like the thing we did at the beginning today with the Spectrasonics piece, how just sound can inspire so much. I'd like you to all think about paying attention to the natural world around you and how that can be a story, because all art is great story. And every day that you're walking around, you're seeing multiple stories happen all the time. Now, what were the stories? The first story was a walk from 14th Street up to 34th Street on the High Line and what I saw that day. The second one was a couple of days in Acadia National Park, and you saw the morning day, you saw the ocean. Some of it was videotaped, some of it, which I did with my phone, and some of it, and most of it was still photos. The last one that I did with my phone, I was walking my dog in the morning in a place not far from where I live, and the rain had started, but it wasn't raining too hard for me not to be out. But I was in this one area, and I thought I just got inspired to start shooting different clips of film, right? And so I got down on the ground with my knees on the ground, and I shot that first thing where in slow motion where the rain was bouncing off the pavement, and then a few other areas there. And I came back and I assembled all that, and I wrote music to that. I wrote music to all of these things. So what I want you to start thinking, you're going to do the assignment that's due next week, and I'm going to send an email tomorrow with all this. But you're going to do the assignment that's due next week, which is the distortion assignment. And then for the following week, what I'd like you to have done is to have an idea as to what kind of story you could tell which takes place in your day-to-day life or something that you can easily access. And you're going to take photos or videos with your phone. And then you're going to work on that stuff. Now, I had asked last week about Windows. I've spoken to Tom in the office, and there's a Mac lab in the basement of the music library. And so you can access iMovie and iPhoto there, where you can, and we'll go over basic treatments using those softwares. And I will show you how to import a click track into iMovie and then do your edits so that they fall into a click track, which will make it easier for you to write music too, if something's at a steady tempo. And so, yes. So, so basically you're going to be a filmmaker and you're going to be a composer. Now, I don't expect you to take pictures as well as I do. I've been working on my photography for the past 5 or 6 years, and I'm not a great photographer, but I'm getting better, but you can do so much with your phones now. The one of the rainy day up by where I live, I did that with an iPhone 11. All right. So, and that's an older phone. I've upgraded my phone since then, but that's an older phone. So I've started talking to you last week about some of the. I showed you some photos, and with the Picasso and how he used the rule of thirds. I'll talk to you a little bit about that stuff. All your phones, the viewfinder should have a grid that you can enable that will help you, right? So let me show you again. So I've been down here, and I've been acquiring a ton of assets. So the other day I went to this place called the Wakota-Hachi Wetlands, which is an incredible place. And I started taking some photographs, right? So I've got this beautiful photograph of this bird. This is interesting, right? That's the reflection. So this is the tree, and then this is the reflection of the tree. And I flipped it upside down so that it looks like the reflected birds are sitting on a tree. It's kind of interesting. Some birds flying, a solo bird, close up. And I got a few different views of this guy. Yeah, I don't like this one so much. It's out of focus. This one I like. All right, I've got several shots of the same thing, and that's nice for... And I'll talk to you about this stuff for making like if you're doing rhythmic hits, you can change the frame and it's the same subject, but a different spot. So you can plan those things out like that, right? Then I've got a bunch of this guy, and you see how when I zoom fast, like you can do accents, musical accents, and I'll show you how to work on that. And this is a film I took of the beach one sunrise. I did this with my phone. The other ones I did with my good camera. And I've got a few things like that. Like I've got another one here that I did in slow motion. And your phones should have slow motion video. And then I have a couple of other photos from the beach. Now, obviously, these are like really high quality photos. That's my pup. So, what's the story for this? Well, I started out the morning at the beach, and then I went to the wildlife refuge, and then I walked through the refuge, and those are the sights I saw. And then maybe I can have a slow motion end at the beach. Although that would be weird. I wish I had sunset, which would be kind of cool, but maybe I can get that asset. So what you're going to eventually do is the first steps would be you'd accrue all these assets, you'd get them in a folder, and then you'd change the names, you'd title them. And then you'd start assembling them you get them into iPhoto. And if you have to do some edits to them, you can do that. And I can show you how to do that. And then what you can also do is you can duplicate the photo a few times. So what's kind of cool about that is you can do something where let's say the photo starts off in black and white, and then you've got the same photo and it's got a little bit of color, and then you got the same photo and it's full color. You can do a crossfade between those 3 photos. Somebody has a question. Is that correct? I'm seeing reactions go up and down, but no, it doesn't seem like anybody's doing it. Anyway, so I can show you how to do all these things, but think about what kind of story. It could be like as simple as the 7 train into the city and walking around Grand Central, or, you could a day at Union Square Park, right? Something like that, an afternoon at Union Square with all the insanity that goes on down there. That could be kind of cool. You could take photographs. You could go through the farmers market. You could see, like, on Saturday mornings, they might have the dogs on the southwest corner, which is where we found our dog. All sorts of stuff. You could just think about it. It could be a day where you're walking around Crocheron Park or like the Flushing Meadows Park or the Botanical Gardens on Main Street, right? A day, where you're walking around there if there's stuff blooming in a few weeks. So just start thinking about, get a couple of ideas, like what might be kind of interesting for you. And then you think about which one would be the most satisfying for you to do. And then write a piece of music to it using some of these techniques. The stuff that you guys did for the poetry was pretty good. The stuff that I heard, I thought it was very creative, just in general. Anyway, I'll write this all in an email for tomorrow morning and send it out to you, so you have something, a document to follow for the 2 assignments. So just a recap. The distortion assignment is due 1 week from today. We may or may not have a class next week. I'll let you know as soon as I can during the day on Tuesday. And then the ideas for the next assignment are due 2 weeks from today. So get a couple, 3 ideas together. Like I said, I'll write that down in an email for you and send it off. Thank you. It'll be fine, Daniel. It's a 2-day drive and an unpacking and setting up my studio again in my house. Everything else is not a problem. It's just getting all the wiring all together and making sure everything is set up. So, yeah. All right. I will catch you guys next week. Have a great weekend, and thank you for being here.